GhastlyGarlic Episode 1, Lost in the Pine Barrens, a teen trio's encounter with the Jersey Devil. In the heart of New Jersey's Pine Barrens, where the trees grow thick and tangled, and the shadows seem to stretch on forever, lies a legend as old as the land itself. It is a tale whispered among locals and passed down through generations, a story of fear and fascination. It is the legend of the Jersey Devil. The tale begins in the early 18th century, a time when the Pine Barrens were a vast, untamed wilderness teeming with mystery and danger. It was said that a woman named Mother Leeds, living in the remote village of Leeds Point, found herself pregnant with her 13th child. Frustrated and exhausted, she cried out in despair, cursing the unborn child and wishing it would be born a devil. As the story goes, on a stormy night in 1735, Mother Leeds went into labor, surrounded by her family and neighbors. But as the child emerged from the womb, it became clear that this was no ordinary birth. The baby's cries echoed through the night, unnaturally loud and piercing, as its tiny body contorted and twisted into a grotesque shape. It sprouted wings like those of a bat, hooves like those of a horse, and a forked tail that lashed out with fury. Terrified, the family and onlookers watched in horror as the creature tore through the room, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly light. And then, with a deafening screech, it flew up the chimney and out into the stormy night, disappearing into the darkness of the Pine Barrens. From that day forward, the legend of the Jersey Devil was born. Tales of its nocturnal prowling spread like wildfire, striking fear into the hearts of all who heard them. Some claimed to have seen the creature with their own eyes, describing it as a monstrous being with glowing red eyes and leathery wings. Others spoke of its eerie cries, which echoed through the woods like the wails of the damned. As the years passed, the legend of the Jersey Devil only grew stronger, becoming deeply ingrained in the folklore of the Pine Barrens. Countless sightings and encounters were reported, each adding to the creature's mystique and terror. But despite the fear it inspired, there were those who were drawn to the mystery of the Jersey Devil. Adventurers and thrill-seekers flocked to the Pine Barrens in search of the legendary creature, hoping to catch a glimpse of the infamous devil that haunted the woods. Among them were a group of teenagers from nearby towns, drawn together by their shared fascination with the supernatural. Alex, a bold and adventurous young man with a love for urban legends, was the ringleader of the group. He had heard stories of the Jersey Devil since he was a child, and now, as a teenager, he was determined to uncover the truth behind the legend. Sarah, Alex's best friend since childhood, was more cautious but no less intrigued by the mystery of the Pine Barrens. With her quick wit and sharp mind, she was always ready to join Alex on his adventures, even if it meant facing their deepest fears. Emma, the newest member of the group, was a quiet and reserved girl with a fascination for the supernatural. She had recently moved to the area and was eager to explore the mysteries of her new home. Together, the three friends spent their summer days hiking through the dense woods of the Pine Barrens, searching for signs of the elusive creature that lurked within. They pored over old books and articles, piecing together clues and stories in their quest for the truth. One warm summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the woods grew dark and silent, the trio gathered around a crackling campfire deep in the heart of the Pine Barrens. The flames cast flickering shadows on their faces as they shared stories of the Jersey Devil and other local legends. Did you know that some people believe the Jersey Devil is actually the cursed child of Mother Leeds? Alex said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. I've heard that too. It's a creepy thought, isn't it, to think that something like that could really exist? Emma shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. Do you think it's true? Do you think the Jersey Devil is out there, somewhere in these woods? Alex shrugged, tossing another log onto the fire. Who knows, but wouldn't it be amazing if we could find out for ourselves? Imagine being the ones to uncover the truth behind the legend. The idea hung in the air, tantalizing and terrifying in equal measure. For a moment, the three friends were silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Then, with a shared glance, they made a silent agreement. They would set out into the woods tomorrow, in search of the Jersey Devil. As the fire crackled and popped, casting a warm glow over the clearing, they made plans for their adventure, their hearts filled with anticipation and a hint of trepidation. Little did they know, their quest for the truth would lead them into a nightmare beyond their wildest imaginings, a nightmare from which they might never escape. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, the sky a brilliant shade of blue above the towering trees of the Pine Barrens. Excitement buzzed in the air as Alex, Sarah, and Emma gathered their supplies and prepared for their adventure into the woods. "We need to be prepared for anything," Alex declared, his voice filled with determination. "The Pine Barrens can be dangerous, especially if the Jersey Devil is out there." Sarah nodded in agreement, checking the straps on her backpack. "We should make sure we have enough food and water, and maybe some emergency supplies just in case." Emma glanced nervously at the dense forest surrounding them, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Do you really think we'll find anything out there?" Alex flashed her a grin, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "You never know until you try, right? Besides, even if we don't find the Jersey Devil, we'll still have an adventure." With their packs loaded and their spirits high, the three friends set off into the woods, following a narrow trail that wound its way through the dense undergrowth. As they walked, the forest seemed to come alive around them, the rustle of leaves and the chirp of birds filling the air. Shafts of sunlight filtered through the canopy above, dappling the forest floor with patches of golden light. Despite the beauty of their surroundings, there was an undercurrent of tension in the air, a sense of unease that lingered just beneath the surface. The Pine Barrens were known for their rugged terrain and unpredictable weather, and the possibility of encountering the Jersey Devil only added to the feeling of danger. But Alex, Sarah, and Emma pressed on, their curiosity driving them forward into the unknown. Hours passed as they trekked deeper into the heart of the Pine Barrens, the trail winding its way through dense stands of trees and overgrown brush. Along the way, they paused to take in the sights and sounds of the forest, marveling at the beauty of their surroundings. "This place is incredible," Sarah breathed, her eyes wide with wonder as she gazed up at the towering trees above. Alex grinned, a sense of exhilaration coursing through him as he took in the vast expanse of wilderness around them. "It's like stepping into another world, isn't it? I can see why people believe the Jersey Devil calls this place home." Emma nodded, her gaze lingering on a patch of dense undergrowth. "I just hope we're ready for whatever we might find out here." As they continued along the trail, the forest grew darker and denser, the trees looming overhead like silent sentinels. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and a sense of foreboding settled over the group like a heavy blanket. Suddenly, Alex froze, his senses tingling with a sudden awareness. He held up a hand, signaling for the others to stop. "What is it?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustle of leaves. Alex frowned, his eyes scanning the trees around them. "I thought I heard something, like a rustling in the bushes." Emma's breath caught in her throat as she listened, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Do you think it could be?" Before she could finish her sentence, a low growl echoed through the forest, sending a shiver down their spines. The three friends exchanged nervous glances, their hearts racing as they tried to make sense of the sound. "It could be anything," Alex said, his voice steady despite the rising panic in his chest. "Let's just stay calm and keep moving." With cautious steps, they continued along the trail, their senses on high alert for any sign of danger. But as they rounded a bend in the path, they came to a sudden stop, frozen in their tracks by the sight before them. A clearing spread out before them, bathed in dappled sunlight and filled with the chirping of birds. But it was what lay at the center of the clearing that caught their attention, a large, shadowy figure hunched over something on the forest floor. Sarah gasped, her eyes widening in horror as she recognized the creature before them. It's the Jersey Devil." Sure enough, there, just a few yards away, stood the infamous creature itself. Its dark, leathery wings were spread wide, casting a long shadow over the ground. Its eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light as it tore at something on the forest floor with its sharp claws. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the creature, his mind racing with a mixture of fear and fascination. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for, the chance to see the legendary Jersey Devil with their own eyes. But even as he watched, a sense of unease settled over him like a dark cloud. Something about the creature seemed off, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it were in the grip of some unseen force. "We should go," Emma whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "We shouldn't be here." Alex hesitated, torn between his desire to stay and his instinct to flee. But before he could make a decision, the Jersey Devil suddenly froze, its head snapping up as if it had sensed their presence. In an instant, The creature's eyes locked onto theirs, its gaze piercing through the shadows with an intensity that sent a chill down their spines. "Run!" Alex shouted, his voice filled with urgency as he grabbed Sarah and Emma by the hand and pulled them away from the clearing. Together, they sprinted through the woods, their hearts pounding in their chests as they raced to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the creature. Behind them, they could hear the sound of heavy footsteps and the beating of wings, growing louder with each passing moment. "We need to find somewhere to hide," Sarah gasped, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Alex nodded, his mind racing as he scanned the forest for any sign of shelter. And then, just ahead, he spotted it, a small cave nestled into the side of a rocky outcropping. "There!" he shouted, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. With renewed determination, they dashed towards the cave, their footsteps echoing off the forest floor as they ran. As they reached the mouth of the cave, they dove inside, panting and gasping for breath as they collapsed onto the rocky ground. For a moment, they lay there in silence, the sound of their ragged breathing filling the air. Then, slowly, Alex sat up, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of pursuit. But the forest was silent, save for the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. We lost it," Emma whispered, her voice tinged with disbelief. Alex nodded, a sense of relief flooding through him. "Yeah, I think we did." But even as he spoke, a nagging doubt tugged at the back of his mind. The Jersey Devil was still out there, lurking in the shadows of the Pine Barrens, waiting for its next victim. And as they huddled together in the darkness of the cave, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that their encounter with the legendary creature was far from over. Inside the dimly lit cave, Alex, Sarah, and Emma huddled together, their hearts still racing from their encounter with the Jersey Devil. The memory of the creature's piercing gaze lingered in their minds, casting a shadow over their newfound sanctuary. "We can't stay here," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with urgency. "That thing could find us at any moment." Alex nodded, his mind racing with thoughts of escape. The cave offered temporary safety, but they knew they couldn't linger for long. "We need to keep moving," he agreed, his voice tinged with determination. "We have to find a way out of these woods." Emma glanced nervously at the mouth of the cave, her eyes wide with fear. "But where do we go? How do we know it's safe?" Alex hesitated for a moment, his mind searching for a solution. Then, a plan began to form in his mind. "We need to find the ranger station," he said, his voice firm with resolve. "It's our best chance of getting help." Sarah's eyes brightened with hope. "That's a good idea. If anyone can help us, it's the rangers." With their plan in place, they gathered their belongings and prepared to leave the safety of the cave. But as they stepped out into the fading light of the evening, a sense of unease settled over them like a heavy fog. The woods seemed darker now, the shadows deeper and more sinister. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of twigs, sent a shiver down their spines. With cautious steps, they ventured out into the forest, their senses on high alert for any sign of danger. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and a sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air. As they made their way through the woods, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across their path. The darkness seemed to swallow them whole, obscuring their surroundings and filling them with a growing sense of dread. But they pressed on, driven by the hope of reaching safety before it was too late. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence of the forest, a low, guttural growl that sent a chill down their spines. They froze, their hearts pounding in their chests as they strained to listen for any sign of movement. Then, from the darkness ahead, came the sound of heavy footsteps, drawing closer with each passing moment. "It's coming," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with fear. Alex's mind raced as he tried to come up with a plan. They were trapped, with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. And then, just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, he spotted it, a narrow trail leading deeper into the woods. "There!" he shouted, pointing towards the trail. "We need to go that way." With renewed determination, they dashed towards the trail, their footsteps echoing off the forest floor as they ran. Behind them, they could hear the sound of heavy footsteps and the beating of wings, growing louder with each passing moment. "We need to hurry," Emma gasped, her breath coming in ragged gasps. They ran faster, their hearts pounding in their chests as they raced through the darkness. The trail seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning through the dense undergrowth, but still they pressed on, driven by the hope of reaching safety. Suddenly, Alex stumbled, his foot catching on a root hidden in the darkness. He went sprawling to the ground, his hands scraping against the rough forest floor. "Alex!" Sarah cried, skidding to a stop beside him, but before she could help him up, a dark shadow loomed over them, blotting out the stars above. They looked up to see the towering figure of the Jersey Devil, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly light as it descended upon them. With a cry of fear, they scrambled to their feet and ran, their hearts pounding in their chests as they raced through the darkness. But the creature was relentless, its wings beating against the air as it pursued them through the trees. "We can't outrun it," Emma gasped, her voice filled with despair. Alex glanced around, his mind racing as he searched for a way to escape. And then, he saw it, a narrow crevice in the rocks, just ahead. "There!" he shouted, pointing towards the crevice. "We can hide in there." With a burst of speed, they dashed towards the crevice, squeezing through the narrow opening just as the Jersey Devil swooped down upon them. They huddled together in the darkness, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as they waited for the creature to pass. Outside, they could hear the sound of the Jersey Devil's wings as it searched for them, its angry cries echoing through the night. But inside the crevice, they were safe, hidden from view by the thick walls of rock. As the minutes passed, the sounds of the forest grew quiet, the only sound the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. "We should wait here until morning," Alex whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. "Then, we'll make our way to the ranger station." The others nodded in agreement, their hearts still racing from their narrow escape. And so, they waited in the darkness, clinging to each other for comfort as they prayed for the first light of dawn. As dawn broke over the Pine Barrens, Alex, Sarah, and Emma emerged from the narrow crevice where they had taken shelter for the night. Their bodies were stiff and sore from the cramped quarters, but they were grateful to have survived the encounter with the Jersey Devil. "We need to keep moving," Alex said, his voice firm with determination. "We have to find that ranger station." Sarah nodded in agreement, her eyes scanning the dense forest around them. "Agreed. Let's get out of these woods before that thing finds us again." With a shared sense of urgency, they set off along the trail, their eyes peeled for any sign of danger. The air was cool and crisp, the early morning light casting long shadows across the forest floor. But as they walked, a sense of unease settled over them like a heavy shroud. The woods seemed to stretch on forever, the trees looming overhead like silent sentinels. "We've been walking for hours," Emma said, her voice tinged with frustration. "How much farther do you think it is to the ranger station?" Alex glanced at the map he had brought with him, his brow furrowed in concentration. "According to this, it should be just a few miles ahead. We're getting close." Encouraged by the thought of reaching safety, they pressed on, their footsteps echoing off the trees as they walked. But as the hours passed, the trail grew fainter and fainter, until it disappeared altogether, leaving them stranded in the heart of the Pine Barrens. "We're lost," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with fear. Alex cursed under his breath, his mind racing as he tried to think of a solution. They were deep in the woods with no trail to guide them, and the Jersey Devil could be lurking around any corner. "We need to find our way back to the trail," he said, his voice tinged with urgency. "We can't stay out here in the open." With a sense of determination, they set off into the trees, their eyes scanning the dense undergrowth for any sign of the trail. But as they walked, the forest seemed to close in around them, the trees growing thicker and more tangled with each passing moment. "We're going in circles," Emma said, her voice tinged with frustration. Alex nodded, his heart sinking with each step they took. They were lost, with no idea which way to go or how to find their way back to safety. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence of the forest, a low, guttural growl that sent a shiver down their spines. They froze, their hearts pounding in their chests as they strained to listen for any sign of movement. Then, from the darkness ahead, came the sound of heavy footsteps, drawing closer with each passing moment. "It's the Jersey Devil," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with terror. With a shared glance, they broke into a run, their footsteps pounding against the forest floor as they fled from the approaching danger. But no matter how fast they ran, the creature seemed to be gaining on them, its growls growing louder and more menacing with each passing moment. "We need to find somewhere to hide," Alex gasped, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Just ahead, they spotted a cluster of boulders nestled among the trees. With a burst of speed, They dashed towards the rocks, seeking refuge from the creature that pursued them. They ducked behind the boulders, their hearts pounding in their chests as they waited for the Jersey Devil to pass. Outside, they could hear the sound of heavy footsteps and the beating of wings as the creature searched for them, its angry cries echoing through the forest. They huddled together in the darkness, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as they prayed for the danger to pass. But as the minutes stretched on, the sounds of the forest grew quiet, the only sound the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. "We should wait here until it's safe," Alex whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. "Then, we'll try to find our way back to the trail." The others nodded in agreement, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. And so, they waited in the darkness, clinging to each other for comfort as they prayed for the nightmare to end. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the pine barrens, Alex, Sarah, and Emma huddled behind the boulders, their hearts heavy with fear. The night air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the distant cries of nocturnal creatures. "We can't stay here forever," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Alex nodded, his mind racing with thoughts of escape. They were lost in the heart of the pine barrens, hunted by both the Jersey Devil and the unseen forces that seemed to conspire against them. "We need to find a way out of these woods," he said, his voice tinged with urgency. "We can't let that thing find us again." Emma glanced nervously towards the darkness beyond the boulders, her eyes wide with fear. "But how? We're completely surrounded." Alex hesitated, his mind searching for a solution. They were trapped, with no way to navigate the dense undergrowth that stretched out before them. And then, just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon, a faint glow in the distance, barely visible through the trees. "What's that?" Sarah asked, her eyes narrowing as she strained to see through the darkness. Alex's heart skipped a beat as he realized what it was, the warm glow of a campfire, flickering in the night. "It must be a campsite," he said, his voice filled with relief. "If we can make it there, we might be able to find help." With renewed determination, they set off through the trees, their eyes fixed on the distant glow as they pushed through the undergrowth. As they drew closer, the sound of voices drifted through the darkness, mingling with the crackling of the fire. They quickened their pace, driven by the hope of reaching safety, but as they emerged into the clearing, their hearts sank at the sight before them. The campsite was deserted, the tents torn and tattered, the remnants of a struggle strewn across the forest floor. It was as if the occupants had fled in terror, leaving behind only chaos and destruction. "What happened here?" Emma whispered, her voice trembling with fear. Alex's eyes scanned the clearing, searching for any sign of life, but all he could see was the eerie stillness of the night, broken only by the faint glow of the dying fire. "We need to leave," Sarah said, her voice tinged with urgency. "Whatever happened here, it's not safe." With a sense of foreboding, they turned to leave the campsite behind, their footsteps echoing off the forest floor as they made their way back into the darkness. But as they walked, a sudden movement caught Alex's eye, a dark shape lurking in the shadows, watching them with glowing eyes. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest as he realized what it was, the Jersey Devil, stalking them through the night. "We have to run," he shouted, his voice filled with fear. With a burst of speed, they dashed through the trees, their footsteps pounding against the forest floor as they fled from the approaching danger. But the creature was relentless, its wings beating against the air as it pursued them through the darkness. "We can't outrun it," Sarah gasped, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Alex glanced around, his mind racing as he searched for a way to escape. And then, just ahead, he spotted it, a narrow ravine, hidden among the trees. "There!" he shouted, pointing towards the ravine. "We can hide in there." With a burst of speed, they dashed towards the ravine, leaping into its depths just as the Jersey Devil swooped down upon them. They huddled together in the darkness, their hearts pounding in their chests as they waited for the creature to pass. Outside, they could hear the sound of the Jersey Devil's wings as it searched for them, its angry cries echoing through the night. But inside the ravine, they were safe, hidden from view by the thick walls of earth. As the minutes passed, the sounds of the forest grew quiet, the only sound the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. "We should wait here until morning," Alex whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. "Then, we'll try to find our way back to safety." The others nodded in agreement, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. And so, they waited in the darkness, clinging to each other for comfort as they prayed for the nightmare to end. As dawn broke over the Pine Barrens, Alex, Sarah, and Emma emerged from the ravine, their bodies stiff and sore from the cramped quarters. But they were grateful to have survived another night in the unforgiving wilderness. "We need to keep moving," Alex said, his voice firm with determination. "We can't stay out here any longer." Sarah nodded in agreement, her eyes scanning the dense forest around them. "Agreed. Let's get out of these woods before that thing finds us again." With a shared sense of urgency, they set off through the trees, their eyes peeled for any sign of danger. The air was cool and crisp, the early morning light casting long shadows across the forest floor. But as they walked, a sense of unease settled over them like a heavy shroud. The woods seemed to stretch on forever, the trees looming overhead like silent sentinels. "We've been walking for hours," Emma said, her voice tinged with frustration. "How much farther do you think it is to the ranger station?" Alex glanced at the map he had brought with him, his brow furrowed in concentration. "According to this, it should be just a few miles ahead. We're getting close." Encouraged by the thought of reaching safety, they pressed on, their footsteps echoing off the trees as they walked. But as the hours passed, the trail grew fainter and fainter, until it disappeared altogether, leaving them stranded in the heart of the Pine Barrens. "We're lost," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with fear. Alex cursed under his breath, his mind racing as he tried to think of a solution. They were deep in the woods with no trail to guide them, and the Jersey Devil could be lurking around any corner. "We need to find our way back to the trail," he said, his voice tinged with urgency. "We can't stay out here in the open." With a sense of determination, they set off into the trees, their eyes scanning the dense undergrowth for any sign of the trail. But as they walked, the forest seemed to close in around them, the trees growing thicker and more tangled with each passing moment. "We're going in circles," Emma said, her voice tinged with frustration. Alex nodded, his heart sinking with each step they took. They were lost, with no idea which way to go or how to find their way back to safety. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence of the forest, a low, guttural growl that sent a shiver down their spines. They froze, their hearts pounding in their chests as they strained to listen for any sign of movement. Then, from the darkness ahead, came the sound of heavy footsteps, drawing closer with each passing moment. "It's the Jersey Devil," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with terror. With a shared glance, they broke into a run, their footsteps pounding against the forest floor as they fled from the approaching danger. But no matter how fast they ran, the creature seemed to be gaining on them, its growls growing louder and more menacing with each passing moment. "We need to find somewhere to hide," Alex gasped, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Just ahead, they spotted a cluster of boulders nestled among the trees. With a burst of speed, they dashed towards the rocks, seeking refuge from the creature that pursued them. They ducked behind the boulders, their hearts pounding in their chests as they waited for the Jersey Devil to pass. Outside, they could hear the sound of heavy footsteps and the beating of wings as the creature searched for them, its angry cries echoing through the forest. They huddled together in the darkness, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as they prayed for the danger to pass. But as the minutes stretched on, the sounds of the forest grew quiet, the only sound the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. "We should wait here until it's safe," Alex whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of his heart. "Then, we'll try to find our way back to the trail." The others nodded in agreement, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. And so, they waited in the darkness, clinging to each other for comfort as they prayed for the nightmare to end. Hours passed as they huddled behind the boulders, the sun climbing higher in the sky as the day wore on. But despite their hopes, the danger showed no sign of passing. "We can't stay here forever," Sarah said, her voice tinged with frustration. "We need to find a way out of these woods." Alex nodded, his mind racing with thoughts of escape. They were trapped, with no way to navigate the dense undergrowth that stretched out before them. And then, just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon, the distant sound of voices, echoing through the forest. "Do you hear that?" Emma asked, her eyes widening with hope. Alex strained to listen, his heart pounding in his chest. "It sounds like people. We're not alone out here." With a renewed sense of determination, they set off through the trees, following the sound of the voices as they pushed through the undergrowth. As they drew closer, the voices grew louder, until they could see a clearing up ahead, filled with the bustling activity of a search party. "We're saved," Sarah exclaimed, her voice filled with relief, but as they emerged into the clearing, their relief turned to horror at the sight before them. The search party was made up of locals from the nearby town, armed with rifles and shotguns, but they weren't searching for lost hikers, they were hunting for something else entirely. "What's going on here?" Alex demanded, his voice filled with anger, but before anyone could answer, a voice rang out from the crowd, a voice they recognized all too well. Well, what do we have here?" They turned to see the town's sheriff, a sinister smile playing at the corners of his lips. "It looks like we've caught ourselves some trespassers," he said, his eyes gleaming with malice. Alex's heart sank as he realized the truth. They had walked straight into a trap. "We didn't mean to trespass," he said, his voice tinged with desperation. "We were just lost in the woods." But the sheriff just laughed, his laughter echoing through the clearing like the cackle of a madman. "Lost, eh? That's what they all say. But we know the truth, don't we, boys?" The other members of the search party nodded in agreement, their eyes filled with hatred as they glared at Alex, Sarah, and Emma. "They're with the Jersey Devil," one of them growled, his voice dripping with venom. Alex's blood ran cold at the accusation. They had stumbled into the midst of a group of locals who believed in the legend of the Jersey Devil, and now they were being accused of consorting with the very creature they had been trying to escape. "We're not with the Jersey Devil," Sarah protested, her voice trembling with fear. "We were just trying to find our way out of the woods." But the sheriff just laughed again, his eyes flashing with amusement. "Save your breath, girl. You're not fooling anyone. We know what you're up to, and we won't let you interfere with our plans." With a sinking feeling in his stomach, Alex realized they were in serious trouble. The locals were convinced they were in league with the Jersey Devil, and they had no way to prove otherwise. "We need to get out of here," he whispered to Sarah and Emma, his voice barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. But before they could make a move, the sheriff stepped forward, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "Take them," he ordered, his voice cold and menacing. In an instant, they were surrounded by the members of the search party, their rifles and shotguns trained on them with deadly precision. With a sinking feeling in his heart, Alex realized they had no choice but to surrender. They were outnumbered and outgunned, and there was no way they could fight their way out of this. Reluctantly, they raised their hands in surrender, their hearts heavy with defeat as they were led away into the darkness of the forest. As they disappeared into the trees, the distant cry of the Jersey Devil echoed through the night, a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurked in the depths of the Pine Barrens. And as they were taken captive by the very people they had hoped would save them, they couldn't help but wonder if they would ever make it out of the woods alive. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and fear as Alex, Sarah, and Emma were marched through the darkened woods by the group of locals. Their hands were bound tightly behind their backs, and they were surrounded on all sides by armed men, their faces set in grim determination. Alex's mind raced with thoughts of escape, but he knew they were outnumbered and outgunned. They had stumbled into a trap, and now they were at the mercy of the very people they had hoped would help them. As they trudged through the undergrowth, the darkness seemed to close in around them, the trees looming overhead like silent sentinels. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of twigs, sent a shiver down their spines. "We have to find a way out of this," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of their footsteps. Alex nodded, his jaw clenched with determination. "We will. We just have to bide our time and wait for the right moment." But as they walked, a sense of foreboding settled over them like a heavy weight. They were being led deeper into the heart of the Pine Barrens, far from any hope of rescue. Finally, after what felt like hours, they emerged into a small clearing in the woods. At its center stood an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches reaching up towards the sky like twisted fingers. In front of the tree, a group of locals had gathered, their faces hidden in the shadows cast by the flickering flames of a campfire. The air was thick with tension as they watched Alex, Sarah, and Emma approach. Well, what do we have here?" a voice called out from the darkness. They turned to see the town's sheriff, a sinister grin playing at the corners of his lips. "It looks like our little trespassers have finally arrived," he said, his eyes gleaming with malice. Alex's heart sank as he realized the gravity of their situation. They had stumbled into the midst of a group of locals who believed in the legend of the Jersey Devil, and now they were being accused of consorting with the very creature they had been trying to escape. "We didn't mean to trespass," he said, his voice tinged with desperation. "We were just lost in the woods." But the sheriff just laughed, his laughter echoing through the clearing like the cackle of a madman. "Save your breath, boy. We know the truth. You're here to help the Jersey Devil, just like the rest of them." Alex's blood ran cold at the accusation. They were being accused of aiding the very creature they had been trying to escape. "We're not here to help the Jersey Devil," Emma protested, her voice trembling with fear. "We just want to go home." But the sheriff just shook his head, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "It's too late for that now. You've already crossed the line, and now you have to face the consequences." With a sinking feeling in his stomach, Alex realized they were in serious trouble. The locals were convinced they were in league with the Jersey Devil, and they had no way to prove otherwise. "What are you going to do to us?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The sheriff's grin widened, sending a chill down their spines. "We're going to give you to the Jersey Devil," he said, his voice cold and menacing. Alex's heart raced with fear as he realized what the sheriff meant. They were going to be sacrificed to the very creature they had been trying to escape. "We have to get out of here," he whispered to Sarah and Emma, his voice barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. But before they could make a move, the sheriff gestured to the men standing beside him. "Take them to the altar," he ordered, his voice filled with malice. With a sense of dread, Alex, Sarah, and Emma were led towards the ancient oak tree at the center of the clearing. As they approached, they saw that the tree was surrounded by strange symbols carved into the ground, their meaning lost to the ages. At the base of the tree, a crude altar had been erected, made from rough-hewn logs and branches. On top of the altar lay a collection of strange objects, feathers, bones, and bits of fur, arranged in a macabre display. "We have to do something," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with desperation. But before they could formulate a plan, they were forced to their knees in front of the altar, their hands still bound tightly behind their backs. The sheriff stepped forward, a wicked grin spreading across his face as he raised a ceremonial dagger high above his head. "By the power vested in me by the people of this town, I hereby offer these sacrifices to the Jersey Devil," he declared, his voice ringing out through the clearing. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the sheriff approach, the glint of the dagger's blade shining in the firelight. But before the sheriff could strike, a sudden commotion erupted from the edge of the clearing. "What's that?" one of the locals cried, his voice tinged with fear. They turned to see a dark shape moving through the trees, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "It's the Jersey Devil," someone shouted, panic filling the air. With a cry of terror, the locals scattered, their fear overwhelming their sense of duty. Seizing the opportunity, Alex, Sarah, and Emma leapt to their feet and ran, their bound hands slowing them down as they dashed through the trees. Behind them, they could hear the sound of the Jersey Devil's wings as it swooped down upon the clearing, its angry cries echoing through the night. But they didn't stop, didn't look back. They ran as if their lives depended on it, their hearts pounding in their chests as they fled from the approaching danger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they burst through the trees and into the relative safety of the open woods. "We have to keep going," Alex gasped, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "We can't stop until we're out of these woods." With a shared nod, they pressed on through the darkness, their minds filled with thoughts of escape and survival. Hours passed as they stumbled through the undergrowth, the darkness of the Pine Barrens stretching out before them like an endless nightmare. But they didn't give up hope. They knew that as long as they had each other, they had a chance of making it out alive. Finally, just as dawn was breaking over the horizon, they emerged from the trees and onto a narrow dirt road. "We made it," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with relief. With tears of gratitude in their eyes, they collapsed onto the ground, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and relief. But even as they caught their breath, they knew that their ordeal was far from over. They were still in the heart of the Pine Barrens, with no idea how to find their way back to safety. "We have to keep moving," Alex said, his voice tinged with determination. "We can't stay out here in the open." With a shared nod, they forced themselves to their feet and set off down the road, their hearts filled with hope for the first time in what felt like an eternity. As they walked, they knew that they would never forget the horrors they had witnessed in the Pine Barrens, but they also knew that they had survived, against all odds, and that they would do whatever it took to make it home alive. The narrow dirt road stretched out before them, winding its way through the dense forest of the Pine Barrens. Alex, Sarah, and Emma trudged along in silence, their minds still reeling from the night's horrors. As the first light of dawn filtered through the trees, they found themselves reflecting on everything that had happened. They had narrowly escaped the clutches of the Jersey Devil and the dangerous locals, but they were still lost in the vast wilderness, far from any sign of civilization. "We need to figure out where we are," Alex said, breaking the silence. "We can't just wander aimlessly." Sarah nodded in agreement, her eyes scanning the surrounding woods. "But how? We don't have a map, and we have no idea where we are." Emma's gaze fell on the rising sun, its warm light casting a golden glow over the trees. "Maybe we can use the sun to find our way. If we keep heading east, we should eventually come across a road or a trail." Alex considered her suggestion, his mind racing with thoughts of escape. "It's worth a try. Let's keep moving." With renewed determination, they set off down the road, their eyes fixed on the horizon as they followed the path of the rising sun. The air was cool and crisp, the early morning light casting long shadows across the forest floor. As they walked, they found themselves growing more and more hopeful. The road seemed to stretch on forever, but they knew that as long as they kept moving, they had a chance of finding their way back to safety. But as the hours passed, their hope began to wane. The road showed no signs of ending, and the dense forest seemed to stretch out endlessly on either side. "We've been walking for hours," Sarah said, her voice tinged with frustration. "How much farther do you think it is?" Alex glanced at the sun, its position in the sky betraying the passage of time. "It's midday already. We've been walking for hours, but we haven't seen any signs of civilization." Emma's brow furrowed in concern. "What if we're going in the wrong direction? What if we're just walking deeper into the woods?" Alex's heart sank at the thought, but he knew they couldn't afford to give up hope. "We have to keep going. We'll find our way out of here, one way or another." With a shared nod, they pressed on, their footsteps echoing off the trees as they walked. But as the afternoon wore on, their exhaustion began to catch up with them. Their legs grew heavy, and their pace slowed to a crawl. "We need to rest," Sarah gasped, sinking to the ground in exhaustion. Alex and Emma joined her, their bodies trembling with fatigue. They collapsed onto the forest floor, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as they tried to catch their breath. "We can't stay here for long," Alex said, his voice tinged with urgency. "We need to keep moving." But as he spoke, a sudden noise broke the silence of the forest, the distant rumble of an engine, growing louder with each passing moment. They exchanged a hopeful glance, their hearts pounding in their chests as they listened to the sound. "It's a car," Sarah exclaimed, her voice filled with relief. "We're saved." With renewed energy, they forced themselves to their feet and ran towards the source of the noise, their hearts soaring with hope. And then, just ahead, they spotted it, a narrow dirt road, winding its way through the trees, and coming towards them, a beat-up pickup truck, its headlights cutting through the darkness like beacons of hope. "We're saved," Emma cried, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. The truck pulled to a stop in front of them, and the driver leaned out of the window, his face etched with concern. "What are you kids doing out here?" he asked, his voice tinged with worry. Alex's heart raced with gratitude as he explained their ordeal, the camping trip, the encounter with the Jersey Devil, and their desperate flight through the woods. The driver listened intently, his expression growing more and more incredulous with each passing moment. "You kids are lucky to be alive," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "The Pine Barrens are no place for amateurs." He offered them a ride back to town, and they gratefully accepted, piling into the back of the truck as it rumbled down the road. As they drove, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of relief washing over him. They had survived the horrors of the Pine Barrens, and now they were on their way back to safety. But even as he allowed himself to relax, a nagging thought lingered in the back of his mind. What had happened to the locals who had tried to sacrifice them to the Jersey Devil, and what had driven them to such madness in the first place? As they pulled into town, Alex's thoughts were interrupted by the driver's voice. "You kids should go see the sheriff," he said, his tone serious. He'll want to hear about what happened out there. Alex nodded in agreement, his mind still filled with questions. They needed answers, and the sheriff was the best place to start. They thanked the driver for his help and set off towards the sheriff's office, their hearts heavy with anticipation. When they arrived, the sheriff greeted them with a mixture of relief and concern. He listened intently as they recounted their harrowing ordeal, his expression growing more and more serious with each passing moment. "So, you're saying that the locals tried to sacrifice you to the Jersey Devil?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Alex nodded, his jaw clenched with determination. "Yes. They believed we were in league with the creature, but we weren't. We were just trying to survive." The sheriff's brow furrowed in thought as he considered their story. "I've heard rumors about the Jersey Devil, but I never thought they were true. And as for the locals, well, let's just say they've always been a superstitious bunch." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "But what you're telling me is serious. If what you say is true, then we need to investigate further." Alex felt a surge of relief at the sheriff's words. Maybe now they would finally get the answers they were looking for. But as they left the sheriff's office, a sense of unease settled over him. There were still so many unanswered questions, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than met the eye. "We need to find out what happened to those locals," Sarah said, her voice filled with determination. "And we need to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." Alex nodded in agreement, his mind already racing with thoughts of what to do next. They may have escaped the Pine Barrens, but their adventure was far from over, and as they set off into the unknown, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of determination rising within him. They may have been lost in the wilderness, but they had found something much more valuable along the way, the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead, and the courage to fight for what was right. The end.
Thank you for joining this chilling journey. If you enjoyed exploring ghosts, mythical creatures, urban legends, and much more, please share and like this video. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notifications bell for more. See you soon, my brave explorers.